Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast.
Today we're focusing on Nucor and its upcoming earnings to watch.
This is definitely a big one. Before we get into what to look for, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to support the show. And if there's a specific company you want us to look into, leave it in the comments below.
All right, so let's break down the key things we'll be watching for in this report.
Yeah, let's get into it.
We're looking at Nucor's third quarter 2025 results. They're expected to release after the market closes on October 27th.
Okay, standard timing.
Right. And the crucial details, the context and the outlook, that's really going to come during the conference call the following morning.
Gotcha. And that gives us the timing, but, well, we already have a pretty good idea of the starting line, don't we, thanks to management?
We do.
Coming out of Q2, Nucor guided for Q3 earnings to be nominally lower than the second quarter. And that wasn't just like a vague warning. They were pretty specific. They attributed that expected drop almost entirely to margin compression.
Right, specifically within their core steel mills segment.
Exactly.
Yeah, they were effectively, pre-announcing a headwind there. And when we look at Wall Street, the consensus definitely reflects that anticipated pain.
So what are the numbers looking like?
The current revenue consensus sits at $8.12 billion. Now, just for comparison, that implies about a 4% decline compared to the same quarter last year.
Okay, a 4% drop year over year on the top line. And the EPS, the bottom line number everyone watches, that's taking a hit too, I assume.
It is, yeah. The consensus for earnings per share is $2.53.
$2.53.
And that's down both year over year and sequentially from the $2.60 they recorded back in Q2.
Right.
However, there's an unofficial figure floating around, the whisper number.
Ah, yes, the whisper number. That's the unspoken expectation on the street, right?
Yeah.
What people are really thinking.
That's the one. And in this case, the whisper number is actually slightly higher. It's closer to that previous quarter's result, around $2.60 EPS. So it suggests there's maybe some, underlying optimism that they might manage a flat quarter sequentially, despite their own guidance.
Okay, but I think, investors probably need to approach that whisper number with a bit of skepticism.
Probably wise.
Especially given Nucor's recent track record. I mean, over the last 3 months alone, we've seen EPS estimates revised down pretty significantly, like 10%.
That's a big revision downward.
Yeah, and plus, they actually missed the consensus estimates on both revenue and EPS in the previous 2 quarters.
Right. That pattern isn't great.
No. It kind of suggests analysts have maybe been consistently a bit too optimistic, and the market reality has actually been tougher than expected.
That downward momentum is definitely important context. It means, the company's aiming at a significantly lowered bar now.
Lowered bar,
But they still need to execute perfectly just to hit it. So this really sets the stage for a report that's going to be dominated not just by the headline number, but by that fundamental operational pressure, the battle between price and volume.
Okay, let's dig into that battle then. Because the pricing environment, well, it was pretty brutal in Q3, wasn't it?
It really was.
The U.S. steel benchmark, the HRC index hot-rolled coil, that declined by about 8% during the third quarter. That's a direct hit right to the revenue line.
And this is precisely why that margin compression they mentioned in the guidance is so critical. Remember, Nucor is an EAF producer electric arc furnace.
Meaning they rely heavily on scrap steel as their main input.
Exactly. And if we look back just to Q2, the price they were paying for that scrap input was actually up sequentially.
Up, okay.
While at the same time, the average price they were getting for their finished steel product was already down 3% year over year.
Wait, hold on. So they were already paying more for their key raw material in Q2. And then Q3 hits, and the selling price for their finished goods drops another 8%.
Yep.
Wow, that sounds like, the textbook definition of a margin squeeze.
It absolutely is. That cost versus price mismatch is really the central challenge here. So, therefore, the metric you absolutely must monitor in this report isn't just the total profit,
right,
but specifically the gross margin and the operating margin within that steel mill segment.
Because that segment's profitability is where this pressure really shows up.
Precisely. It's the direct casualty of these dual pressures, rising costs and falling prices.
But, okay, there's a major point of strength here too, right? Which is kind of what keeps the bullish arguments alive. Volume.
Yes, volume.
Tonnage shipped in the first half of 2025 was up, a remarkable 9% year over year?
9%, yeah. That indicates pretty robust underlying demand still.
People are still buying steel.
That's the confusing signal, isn't it? The demand is definitely there, but that volume resiliency, well, it clearly came at a cost.
How so?
The average selling price, the ASP, was down 8% in that same first half. It's the classic trade-off, right? They kept their mills running hot, kept people employed, shipped a lot of tons.
But they had to sacrifice pricing power to do it.
Exactly. They gave up price to move volume.
So the really big question for management on the call then is, are they basically selling steel almost at a loss just to keep that capacity utilization high?
That's one question.
And where exactly is that strong volume coming from? Is it like evenly distributed across their markets, or is it heavily skewed?
Well, when they speak, you can bet investors will be dissecting their commentary on demand segmentation very closely.
Yeah.
We know that non-residential construction and infrastructure demand have been major tailwinds recently.
Right. Those have been strong.
But the auto sector generally has been weaker. So we need them to specify which infrastructure end markets are still fueling that 9% volume growth.
And also what their overall capacity utilization rate actually looks like heading into Q4.
Exactly. That outlook piece is critical.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit now. Away from the quarter's financials, maybe talk about the longer-term stuff, the strategic factors that keep investors kind of committed to the company, even during these cyclical downturns.
Sure. And what Nucor does exceptionally well, I think, is distinguish itself through its strategy, particularly around sustainability.
The ESG angle.
Right. The company continues to make pretty significant progress toward its net zero greenhouse gas targets. And what's particularly interesting are the persistent rumors that they might be close to securing some large renewable energy procurement agreements.
Okay, large renewable energy deals. Why do those agreements matter so much for a steel company's valuation?
Well, steelmaking is incredibly energy intensive, right?
That's right.
So securing long-term, maybe fixed-price renewable energy contracts serves two key purposes. First, it potentially lowers their operating costs over the long run, insulating them somewhat from volatile energy prices.
Makes sense.
And second, it really burnishes their ESG credentials, their environmental profile. And that often commands a bit of a premium in institutional investment circles these days. It's a key strategic differentiator for them.
Got it. And speaking of investor signals, they're obviously maintaining their reputation for capital return discipline, the dividend.
Yeah, holding the quarterly dividend firm at $0.55 per share. That's a really key signal for income-focused investors who rely on that stability.
Definitely. However, there was maybe a less than ideal signal during the quarter itself, wasn't there, regarding insider activity?
Yeah, we did see some caution flags pop up there. Specifically, we saw some pretty significant share sales.
How significant?
Over $6 million in total value, executed by the CEO and also some executive vice presidents across late July and August.
Okay.
Now, look, insider sales can always be for personal reasons, diversification, whatever. But when you see a large aggregate amount like that clustered together,
The market notices.
yeah, the market often interprets it as management maybe signaling that they see limited immediate upside in the stock price. It's just something the market definitely tracks.
Fair enough. Something to keep an eye on. Now, looking beyond this specific earnings report, what are the dates investors should maybe circle on their calendar? Things that could trigger stock movement outside of earnings.
Yeah, there are two major institutional drivers coming up. First, you've got the sector ETF rebalancing event. That's set for November 15th.
And why does that matter?
Well, it can lead to significant passive capital flows as these big index funds have to adjust their holdings based on weighting changes. So buying or selling pressure.
Okay, ETF rebalancing. What's the second one?
The second is December 15th. That's when we get the institutional 13F position disclosures.
Seeing what the big funds were doing.
Exactly. This is when the big asset managers, the so-called smart money, have to disclose exactly how they position themselves leading into the end of the year. That data can provide, significant insight into broader market sentiment towards the stock and the sector.
And of course, we can't forget the upside speculation that always seems to be kind of bubbling beneath the surface in the steel sector.
Always.
I'm talking about M&A chatter, and maybe more importantly, those persistent rumors of new federal infrastructure legislation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
While M&A is always sort of a possibility, the huge speculative catalyst here, the real potential game changer, is the prospect of a major new federal infrastructure bill. a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar demand uplift, specifically for steel products used in construction, bridges, roads.
That's the big one.
That's the biggest potential upside scenario for the entire industry, really.
Okay, let's try and tie all this together then. Thinking about the immediate market reaction to this upcoming report, given all these dueling factors, falling prices, but resilient volumes, what is the analyst community actually saying? And how is the market pricing in the potential volatility?
Well, the analyst sentiment is genuinely split,
Right.
which kind of reflects the confusion about this margin situation.
Okay.
You've got J.P. Morgan, for instance, maintaining an overweight rating.
Yeah.
Their confidence seems to rest on the belief that Nucor's superior cost control capabilities,
Their execution.
right, their execution will allow them to navigate these price headwinds better than maybe some of their peers.
But not everyone agrees.
No. Conversely, you have Goldman Sachs maintaining a neutral rating. They're focusing squarely on the exposure to those falling prices as a primary risk right now.
Okay, so a split view from major analysts. And I guess that translates directly into what the options market is telling us about expected movement. The implied volatility, or 5A.
It does. The IB is relatively high heading into the report, which indicates traders are expecting a pretty substantial move one way or the other.
How substantial?
The options market is currently pricing in an expected swing of approximately plus or minus 4.2% for the stock price during the week of earnings.
Okay, 4.2%. For context, what does that mean in dollar terms?
Right now, that translates to about a $5.90 trading range, either up or down from the current price.
Okay, so a decent potential move priced in. Let's summarize the scenarios then, based on the consensus data we talked about. What's the most likely outcome? The base case.
The base case is seen as the most probable, with analysts projecting maybe a 55% probability. This scenario basically sees results landing near the current consensus. So revenue somewhere between $8.05 and $8.20 billion, and EPS between, say, $2.45 and $2.55.
And the market reaction in that case?
If that happens, you'd expect a fairly moderate reaction, likely a price movement of plus or minus 3 to 4%. Nothing too dramatic, sort of in line with expectations.
All right. Now, for the optimistic side, the bullish case, what needs to happen to trigger that?
The bullish case, maybe given a 30% chance perhaps, relies heavily on a positive surprise.
Like what kind of surprise?
Well, that could mean volume surprising significantly to the upside again. Or maybe their cost controls proving much better than feared, proving J.P. Morgan right. Or potentially, most importantly, management issuing really strong, confident Q4 guidance.
And if that happens?
That could lead to a positive move, maybe in the range of plus 4% to plus 7%.
Okay. And finally, the downside risk, the bearish case. Where's that coming from?
That's maybe the 15% probability scenario left over. It happens if that pre-announced margin pressure turns out to be even worse than management guided for.
Oof. Or, maybe more likely, if the Q4 forward guidance is extremely cautious. Perhaps due to, say, further softening they're seeing in key end markets like automotive, or maybe even construction slowing down.
And the damage in that scenario.
If that materializes, you could easily see a negative swing, perhaps in that minus 4% to minus 7% range.
Got it. So pulling it all together, the overall feeling as we head into this report seems to be leaning slightly neutral to bearish. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, mostly because of that combination of the pre-announced margin compression and those significant downward estimate revisions we saw recently. We know the pressure is high.
Right. The market's kind of braced for slightly weaker numbers.
Absolutely. Which means the focus for investors really needs to immediately shift past the Q3 headline numbers, whatever they are.
Yeah, look beyond the past quarter and go straight to that Q4 forward guidance. The real story, the thing that will drive the stock, is going to be what management says about the pace of capacity utilization and, crucially, the demand trends they're seeing for construction and infrastructure projects as we head into the end of the year.
So it's all about the outlook.
That commentary will be the key driver of sentiment moving forward.